College athletes are waking up happier and potentially wealthier this morning after the NCAA's board of directors officially suspended rules that had prohibited athletes from selling rights to their name, image, and likeness. So as soon as today, collegiate athletes may have the opportunity to earn money from endorsements, sponsorships, social media, and other outlets. Joining us now to discuss this in further detail is Doug Eldridge of the DLE agency and Achilles PR. Doug, good morning. Thanks for joining us. Talk us through this. Other people have been making money off of the players. Now they get to as well. So how does this new policy change the future for collegiate sports?
Well, in simplest form, for the first time in history, college athletes will be able to cash in on the very name, image, and likeness that transformed the NCAA into a multi-billion-dollar entity, their own. As you alluded to, for years, the NCAA has really had a money-making machine, a money-printing machine, if you will, off the fruits of the labor of these athletes. And the Supreme Court clearly laid bare last week in their unanimous 9-0 ruling that this would no longer be the way of the future. Now, it's important to delineate to your question that this is not direct payment from the university for their performance, like you would have an NFL on-field contract, but rather this governs their marketing rights and opportunities off of and away from the court, the field, or the track, which is to say endorsements, sponsored social media posts, their ability to do entrepreneurial endeavors, paid appearances, speaking engagements, etc. Typically the off-field marketing opportunities that would be affiliated with a pro or elite level athlete outside of the confines of the NCAA. So this is incredibly significant.
It could complicate matters a little bit also, though, right? The new policy lets athletes enter into agreements with agents. So then what is the flow of communication, of work between the athlete, the agent, and a college institution?
Well, it's definitely intricate, and like anything else, you're always going to have bad players that enter the fray. I don't mean athletes, I mean bad actors. But, looking from the 50,000-foot view, in 2021, we're seeing something really unique. And not just the evolution of the rights available to athletes, but rather the role that technology is playing. You're seeing an emergence of a variety of apps that promise the moon, but it's really generated on algorithm, which is to say match an athlete with a brand that's looking for the same skill set or follower count, etc. But at the end of the day, to your question, Scott, this really comes back, results are driven by relationships. So in some form or another, most of it's going to be cycled and funneled through agencies because they have the pre-existing relationships, but also the framework. As you alluded to in the intro, I do have a management and marketing firm, the DLE agency. We've been around for quite a long time. We also have a commercial public relations firm. So it really is the melding of the two. And the real value from a dollars and cents standpoint for these athletes and the appeal of brands is they fit in that coveted 18 to 34 demo in terms of their target audience. But they bring with it this built-in new generation of expansive and extensive social media engagement and following. So you're really getting double the value and double the impact by working with these young, talented athletes.
There have long been some concerns from critics who say, if you go ahead and approve this measure, what about cheating or the chances of cheating, an athlete maybe throwing a game? Some critics think that this is violating the sanctity of the game. Is that a possibility?
I think if somebody's inclined to think that way, there's going to be little that I or anybody else can say or do to dissuade them from that notion. But I would put it this way. At the Pop Warner or Little League level, we're talking about a game. By the time you get to the elite high school ranks that create the pipeline toward Division I, you're talking about the sport. By the time you get to the NCAA, right, with the $500 million stadium expansions and the NCAA doing $1 billion in media rights alone associated with March Madness, now you're talking about the business. And by the time they finally matriculate to the pro level, and again, that's the 1% of 1% statistically that ever make it to the pros, you're talking about the opportunity for generational wealth. So if there was anything I would take issue with, it's the term game, because it's really relegated, if we're talking in the most literal sense, to that initial innocent, I have a son that just turned 4, that toddler level, where they're at the Little League or the Pop Warner, or they stop in the middle of a soccer game to pick flowers. You very quickly, elevate through the clouds and get up into the stratosphere where you're talking zeros and commas and absolute value. So it really stops being a game. So for those that push the narrative that, this is going to taint the purity of amateurism and the game of football at the collegiate level, it hasn't been a game since Paul Bear Bryant wore that houndstooth-clad checkered cap.
Is there, Doug, an unintended benefit of all this happening? For example, so often we see athletes, it's a trend now that more of them are leaving school at an earlier age to go pro. Does this incentivize some students to stay in school longer?
I think it certainly will, especially for those outside of the two primary revenue-generating sports at the collegiate level, obviously that being football and basketball. Take, for example, I have two athletes that I represent. They're at the professional level that came out of Florida. John Halapio was a starting offensive lineman at the University of Florida. Katrina Young was a diver at Florida State, in-state rivals. In college, John could have made a heck of a lot of money from a marketing standpoint, being a starter and a team captain in the SEC. He's now playing in the NFL. Katrina, by contrast, prior to this ruling, wouldn't have made a penny as a collegiate diver, irrespective of the Florida State fan base, until she just punched her ticket to her second consecutive Olympics last week. So John, the football player, could have made a lot of money in college. Katrina, the decorated diver, would not have. John can do the same at the pro level. Katrina was getting her first opportunities once she made her first Olympic team. So it's really athlete and sport specific. But again, I think in so many ways this ties back to the role of social media, because what that does, Scott, is really extrapolates the personality to run in duality with the performance. And in so many ways, marketers now, in the context as a personal brand, they're looking for the personality of these athletes. What is unique about you that I can thread the needle with to connect with my target consumer? And so you're not really relegated to the large revenue generating sports like you would be in a traditional sponsorship or endorsement relationship. Obviously, the floodgates are going to open for those guys, but you really are going to see unique opportunities for some of the smaller niche collegiate-based sports, provided they have the personality and the backstory to make themselves relevant.
Yeah, certainly a major development in the sports world. All right, Doug Eldridge, thank you so much for joining us.
Here at the
Thank you for having me.